And we're back here, Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP. 215-204-9449 is the number if you want to call and hang with us. Fran Dunphy, head basketball coach of the Temple Owls, will join us in studio at 11:30. But now let's go out to the phone lines and welcome in a man who's been calling the tournament games, been watching Florida Gulf Coast just like I did over this weekend, and it's been a phenomenal run, and that is Scott Graham. Scott, Zach Gelb here, and Haley Condon. How are you?
Doing well, guys. How you doing this morning?
Well, we're doing fantastic, and the show before me actually told me that today, if Harry Kalas was still around, it would be his birthday today. And a little birdie also told me that the way that you first got on the air and got a job was winning a Harry Kalas voice impersonation contest. Is that true?
It's true in part. I didn't get a job out of it. I was still a junior in college at the time, but they had a Harry Kalas sound-alike contest in Philadelphia when I was a junior at Penn, and I won. And part of what I won season tickets. I won a whole Phillies prize pack. But the thing to me that was the coolest thing of all was that night, the contest happened on the field in between games of a doubleheader. You know, they used to play doubleheaders, and not day-night doubleheaders, actual doubleheaders. And in between games, they did it. They brought me upstairs, and at the second or third inning of the next game, I got to call on the air with Harry and Whitey Ashburn. So it was cool. It was fun. It was a long time before I was associated in any way with the Phillies after that, but certainly a great memory.
Did you ever do Harry Kalas in front of Harry Kalas?
I did it that night in front of Harry Kalas, but yeah, I didn't. As time went by, I didn't do it very much anymore, although every once in a while Harry would point to somebody and say, "This is the guy that does the best me." So.
Well, that's fantastic, and I've heard a plethora of guys do impersonations over the year, whether it's Frank Caliendo, Greg Giannotti, formerly of WFAN, now in Pittsburgh, and it's always fun to hear some of those guys do that thing. But tell me something about Harry Kalas that most people don't know. I've always heard some incredible stories about him.
And there are countless stories, and my company did a film about the making of the Harry Kalas Memorial statue last year called "Bringing Harry Home" that was on a couple of times, and might very well end up being on again this year. He had an amazing sense of humor. He had an amazing ability to kind of latch on to things that he loved to have fun with and literally never let them go. One of my favorites was when I was with the team doing the pregame and postgame stuff back in '93. They were in the World Series. And I had a moment in which I was doing a 2-hour pregame show up in Toronto before Game 1, and I was doing an interview with a guy who was in the dugout out of my line of sight. And the producer, who was also my boss, would wave from the dugout up to the audio technician who was sitting next to me. He would then put on his headphones. He would write down the name for me, and I would say, "Oh, okay, I've got Dave Hollins coming up here." And I say, "Well, let's welcome Dave Hollins," and I'd start the interview. So he waves for one of these things, and the guy writes down the name, and it says Duke Rajola. And I have absolutely no idea who Duke Rajola is. So I'm live. It's my first World Series pregame show. I don't know what to do. So I'm vamping for time. You know, there's no internet at this point. I can't Google this thing. I'm sitting there doing the best I can, coming up with every old baseball player's name I've ever heard. I have no idea. So then producer waves again, guy points to the sheet again, underlines it, got to do it now. So I'm thinking, what do I do? The only thing I could think to ask him is what he's doing there, because maybe if I hear that, I'll get a feel for who he is. So I said, "We're joined now by Duke Rajola. Duke, what are you doing here?" He said, "Scott, this is Joe Garagiola." The producer had said, "Tell Scott we've got Joe Garagiola, Duke Garagiola. And that's what the guy wrote down, Duke Rajola. So Harry, of course, was sitting in the booth doing his prep work at this point and heard it. For that time, from 1993 in October until the day of his passing, Harry never let me forget that. So if Joe Garagiola happened to be in the stands, he would say, "Scott Graham, your friend Duke is here today." Or, there'd be something up on the TV set in our office where we were preparing. "Look, it's your buddy Duke." Now, he took this thing forever. I was gone from the Phillies for a year at that time, at the time I'm about to tell you, and I'm out doing some food shopping. My wife calls me to tell me to add something else to the list. She said, "You got a package in the mail." I said,
my God.
I said, do me a favor and open up the front cover.
Did he sign it?
Harry signed it. Scott, hope you enjoy my new book, Your Friend Duke. And that's after I'd already been gone for a year. He just never let it go.
We've all been on the side of that, on giving it out to our friends and then as well as messing up on the air. So that's a fantastic story. Scott Graham joins us, and he was on the call for this Florida Gulf Coast team. And I was in the building at the Wells Fargo Center covering this team, and it's just been an incredible story. No one even saw them making a run in this tournament, although they even did beat Miami this year, but a 15 seed going to the Sweet 16. What's impressed you most about this team so far?
Confidence, an incredible level of confidence, and their ability to play their game and impose their will on who they're playing. You know, they played Georgetown, and Georgetown's going to try to play a slower game, and they had a 2-point lead at halftime in a game that was being played in the low 20s. And Andy Enfield told us after the game and the next day, he said that that wasn't where we wanted to be. So coming out of the locker room at halftime, we said we are going to do what we can about making this our type of game right now. And they came out and they imposed their will on Georgetown, dropped a huge run on them, and put that game to bed in the most incredible of circumstances. And then to be able to come out 2 days later, and Georgetown's a very good basketball team, but they're also not an incredibly experienced basketball team. They went up against the San Diego State team that is filled with veterans, 4th trip to the NCAA tournament in 4 years, seniors, juniors, Jamal Franklin's an NBA player. I mean, these are guys who have been down this road, have fought the wars before, and they somehow figured out a way to impose their will on that game, too. And, for guys that people don't know a whole lot about, clearly there are some skills here. Brett Comer's about as dynamic a point guard as I've seen in a long time. Bernard Thompson is a great defensive player, can shoot from the outside. Sherwood Brown is a really complete player. They've got a lot of different pieces in place, but the fact that they're able to take their game and dictate it to teams that have played in this situation before and do it appears at will. I mean, there was a little while there. It looked like we were looking at Midnight Madness. It wasn't a basketball game. It was incredible to me that they were able to do it the way they were able to do it, and clearly they're having a blast doing it.
They're cool, they're calm, and they're loose. And watching these guys, and they definitely take after their head coach. And after the press conference, when they go to the Sweet 16, his opening statement was, we're going to the Sweet 16. Let's answer some questions. So they're embracing the moment, definitely. But we've seen an abundance of teams make some runs over the years, whether it was George Mason, VCU, and Butler. And all three of those coaches, and I know Larinaga left a little bit afterwards to go to Miami, but a lot of them stuck around for a few years after they won those championships, obviously with Stevens and Shaka still at their respective universities. But I would have to imagine that this coach is going to be getting a lot of offers after this run is over.
I would imagine he probably will. I don't know that at this point, what his situation is and why he would even consider the idea of going anywhere else at this particular time, other than, I think that's another story for another day. And I don't think any coach would want to be in a situation where he's being viewed as a one-hit wonder like this. And I think that, a couple years down the line, you might be looking at the same thing if they put together some sustained excellence. But honestly, you talk about the other teams that have made those deep runs, and Butler was a very, very strong team, a veteran team when they made their back-to-back Final Four runs. VCU came out of the play-in game and figured out a way to make it all the way to the Final Four because they were using a specific style. George Mason just gutted it out. They were just a gritty team. Again, a couple of guys on that team that were seniors that were leaders. This team is a little bit different. I mean, this is not we're hanging on, trying to hang around into the last 5 minutes against one of the Giants and figure out a way to eke out a victory. I mean, they laid two very good basketball teams to waste here in Philadelphia. Now, can they do it against Florida? I don't know. But from what I've seen over the course of the past two games in Philadelphia, I wouldn't bet against them.
I exactly agree with you. And people ask me all week long. I did a few radio shows on WIP and was down with Sid Rosenberg in South Florida as a guest covering this team. And they said, can they beat Florida? And I said, why not? Not too many people thought they could beat Georgetown. Not too many people gave them a chance up against San Diego State. And you're exactly right, because they only have two seniors on this team. And Sherwood Brown is the guy that gets most of the minutes out of that senior group. And that's the most incredible part to me, is that this team's young and they could do this for a few more years. But you see this Florida team, they got to a Final Four last year. They've had experience in the past. Donovan has won 2 championships. Preview this game coming up for me.
I think that Billy Donovan's going to have, he's got the better part of a week to try to figure out a way to take away what this team does well. And what they do well more than anything else is get out in transition. Now, to do that, you can stop that a couple of different ways as a coach. One is on the offensive side, you can hit your shots because that's not going to allow them to get out. Although they did get out in transition even after some made baskets, they pushed the pace. But hit your shots, and you're not going to be dealing with a whole lot of, running up and down the floor. And they do a great job of running up and down the floor, staying in lanes, having a trail guy come up behind. Brett Comer's got eyes, in the back of his head with some of the passes that he ended up throwing in transition for some of these highlight film type dunks. In the half-court game, I thought they were good. I thought that, they got into some situations where, Bernard Thompson would hit some open shots, and, he's a 38, 39% three-point shooter, could certainly hit it from the outside. Brown can hit it from the outside. I think that they're going to take a look at this, and they're going to figure out the best way to try to take this down, or the other way to do it against a team that is going to get involved in a track meet like this is, okay, you want to push the pace? We're going to push the pace. We're going to push this game into the 90s, and we're going to wait for you guys to make a mistake, because they did make mistakes during the year. I mean, one of the writers in Philadelphia, Dick Girardi, I was talking to him after the second game, and I said, how incredible is this to you? He said, what's incredible to me is, how did that team lose 10 games this year? How did this team lose to some of the teams that they lost to? And that means that there are holes that we haven't seen yet. And one of the biggest holes that they've had is sometimes they've gotten out in transition and they've turned the ball over. Comer has made mistakes during the course of the year. It didn't seem like he made one in Philadelphia this weekend, but he was a guy who did turn the ball over as a freshman a little bit more, Andy Enfield was telling us about. And they worry that sometimes the high-flying game can kind of get away from them, and they don't execute as perfectly as they do. That would be another way to take care of it. Okay, you want to run? We're going to run. We're not going to make mistakes, and we're going to wait till you do.
Scott Graham joins us on the hotline, Philly's #1 college radio station, WHIP. Fran Dunphy coming up in studio in just a matter of moments. And I know you've been out to the Liacouras Center a few times this year to watch the Temple Owls play and call the games on the radio and with CBS as well. But you see this Temple team, they played a tough effort up against Indiana, and it came down to the final minute 30. They weren't able to get a whole lot of offense other than Khalif Wyatt. They were 9 of 38 besides Khalif from the field. Reactions to what happened down there with Temple in Indiana?
A shame in a lot of ways, because I really thought that they
outplayed them.
They did, and I thought that for a good part of that game, they had that game in hand. Now that said, it's hard to say that you have a game in hand when most of your offense, a gigantic portion of your offense, has come from one guy. And unfortunately, I was in transition from where I was going to get down to my game, so that most of the second half I was listening to as opposed to watching. And I saw the final minute and a half, 2 minutes when I finally got to the arena for my game. But Khalif had himself a marvelous season in terms of being able to score the basketball. I don't think that anybody's going to put him up for Defensive Player of the Year in the Atlantic 10 anytime soon. I think that in that situation, obviously you needed a couple of shots to be hit, and unfortunately it didn't end up happening. Good run. I don't know that in the last several years that you will look and say that this was the best or most complete Temple basketball team. I don't think, by any stretch of the imagination. And they took the #1 seed right down to the wire. I think there's a lot to be proud of there with that team this year, and there's been a sustained level of excellence at Temple now for the last several years. I don't expect any of that to change because you got one of the best coaches in America there.
That's true, Scott. Thanks so much. I appreciate the time. You're phenomenal.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Scott Graham right there. What we'll do now is we'll take a quick break, and when we get back, the head basketball coach of the Temple Owls, Fran Dunphy, live in studio, breaking down the end of the season. Back after this.